That's good. I'm wasting time. I'll just take the camera out, but then I'm good at public speaking. But I know everyone more or less.
Lift it up to the height of you, and I think you want to lift down.
Okay.
No?
No?
Even all out there.
Okay, good. Now?
Yeah.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Good. Okay, good. All right, we'll begin. The LGBT civil rights movement has at its heart, in this present moment, a very heteronormative agenda, assimilation into a patriarchal culture. Yes, it's going to be one of those nights. Just a light after dinner speech. Perhaps more planning on indictment for dessert. So I'll get to my thesis quickly for fear of disapproval. I was asked to go as long as 30 minutes. I won't take that much time. There is a hierarchy within LGBT movements, and it's all too clear when one looks at the focus of their concerns. An overwhelming amount of our resources are going towards the promotion of marriage equality, while issues like homelessness, poverty, violence, and political representation take a back seat. Nowhere could this be more evident than through the Human Rights Campaign, our biggest advocacy group, who have dumped a sea of cash to support marriage equality while simultaneously pandering to corporations and big spending gay and lesbian donors who saw no problem in dropping trans people from workplace protection bills. Now, to be clear, I'm not against marriage equality, not in the slightest. However, it is not coincidental that this has come to the forefront of the LGBT civil rights movement in the present. I'm for the advancement of all serious and material concerns of LGBT peoples to the front of the movement, and certainly gay marriage would provide some serious material benefits. But so would fighting, say, homelessness in our community. By the way, I'm sure you know that 40% of homeless youth are LGBT, startling statistic. Yet this is hardly talked about in comparison. There are no equal signs on Facebook for this matter. Trans people are 4 times more likely to live in a household which makes under 10 grand a year. And one has been assassinated every 16 hours for the first month and a half of 2015. I have more recent statistics. This seems to also be very serious and material for our community. And although it would be unproductive to argue which are more serious, I think we can agree on the necessity of all these positions and question why gay marriage dominates such a large, unproportional focus of our attention. And thus, I think it would do us some good to explore why. First, as I mentioned, the HRC has come under fire for its exclusion of trans peoples and its pandering to rich gay and lesbian donors. No news. But surely the HRC is not alone in such practices, but is the biggest LGBT civil rights organization, so it certainly gets more press. And if you devote a simple Google search to the subject, the results will be plentiful. I'll simply quote Emily Green's 2013 piece from the New Yorker, dropping the T trans rights in the equal marriage era. Facebook profile pictures sporting bold equal signs that can be assumed will change back once DOMA is overturned, and the public will move on. LGBT people in their and our full diversity will still not have been afforded the full rights of citizenship. More marginal, more at risk, and more controversial lifestyles still feel less salient and less politically appealing. Yes, I think it's still fair to say that LGBT civil rights have been reduced to the single issue of gay marriage, and the long-term effectiveness of such a strategy certainly should be questioned. We know what happens historically to single-issue groups. This moves me to the second reason, the far more important one, that I will offer to explain the unproportional push for gay marriage amongst LGBT groups. Marriage and monogamy are liberal patriarchal values. Have you ever heard the old saying, if you can't beat them, join them? Well, this is incorrect. It should really be, if you can't beat them, co-opt them. Lest we forget that MLK Jr.'s famous March on Washington was really going to be a protest, but the Kennedy boys knew better and did what they had to. Now, it's a shining example of our government's tolerance, the American dream, etc. Well, what could promote liberal values more than gay people getting married? And nothing could further the American multicultural ideology than inviting gays and lesbians to live the white heteronormative lifestyle. And this is why gay marriages are single issue. Liberal America sees in it an opportunity. Eddie Huang, the author of Fresh Off the Boat, whose autobiography was co-opted to become a stereotypical and quite racist sitcom for ABC, said the following: They want to tell universal white stories with yellow faces, black faces, brown faces, but they tell the same universal story. And if you go watch how these sitcoms are made, these writers' rooms are like labs. It's like GMO food they're making. Well, they also want to tell it with gay faces. Is this not what Modern Family does? They offer a stereotypical flamboyant gay family with adopted Asian child just to say, look, we're different, but only because we're precisely the same. Tokenism has an important role in capitalist cultures, and that role is to divert attention away from systems of power and the oppression they create for the majority towards anomalies which they can cite as evidence that their exclusionary violence isn't real. Thus replacing the brutality faced by the many with one shining and contrived story of hard work and individualism in our minds. Come on, we're in Michigan. You've all seen 8 Mile. And why not play the part while you're making bank? The mainstream culture loves and supports gay marriage not to celebrate the culture of LGBT peoples, but to colonize it, to speak it through its language, and to tell our story with their native tongue. If you look at the rhetoric around gay marriage, this is not difficult to understand. One love, equal love, same love. But no, our love isn't the same. Your culture supported your love and even promoted it. It was a rite of passage for you. You had proms and first kisses and dinner with moms and dads. Oh, we had painful self-reflection after name-calling, getting kicked out of the house, violence and experimentation, sometimes dangerous, and sometimes with some of you who would later have the audacity to deny it. No, this is not the same love. And it certainly does us a disservice to speak of it as such, ignoring the oppression and its institutional and ideological origins, allowing it to continue unhindered, accepting this cultural violence as one's own crime. This is what liberal rhetorics do. They move to reduce the complex construction of identities by social institutions and cultural relationships to a matter of individual choice. This is the pull yourselves up by your bootstraps individualism that ignores that police in Baltimore treat black citizens differently. There's also the same love, heteronormativity that privileges identities, which are intelligible enough to patriarchal logics while excluding queer, non-monogamous, and trans peoples. Homosexuality was removed from the American Psychiatric Association's Diagnostic Statistic Manual as a mental disorder in 1972. In 2013, the APA had the grace not to remove gender identity disorder, which of course is how they label trans bodies, but to revise it to become gender dysphoria. Yes, trans identity still exists in the Book of Mental Disorders. And I joked many times on a fine April morning, I joked to my class earlier today, I woke up and I no longer had a mental disorder. But what is not a joke and bears only sardony is that I long wish I still had that mental disorder, as I fear more of what this liberal logic will do to me more than any outright systematic exclusion. Sure, I'm now invited wholeheartedly by my culture, psychiatry, and reconstructive surgeons to assist in my transition, but only in so much as I adhere to the bounds of heterosexual norms of male and female, which exist in liberal discourse that I lack the cultural capital to ever enter into. Thus, doing so requires the full forfeiture of my autonomy. And of course, if I fail to accept their diagnosis for my identity, I'm left without the paltry protections they have so earnestly extended me. John Waters recently noted that in his day, racism was big and scary, but it was also stupid. And you could laugh and you could fight it. But today, racism is ominous and it's hidden and it's systematic. It's a result of the way institutions function to privilege some identities while hurting others. Malcolm X once joked of the failures of Martin Luther King Jr.'s liberal rhetorics, that they would not garner autonomy or respect for black folks, but that now you could sit next to white folks on the toilet. Well, we should not accept superficial solutions. Extending the rights of marriage to gay and lesbian peoples will not create equality for LGBT peoples. MLK Jr. noted, perhaps too late, that equality was not enough as he shifted his focus toward the cultural systems of production, namely economics. He said, I believe we are integrating into a burning house. If we do not combat the systems of power and their effects, law, education, economic policies, the lack of political representation, the prevalent homelessness of our youth, the systematic extermination of trans women, just to name a few, which make possible the oppression and marginalization of LGBT individuals, all the rights and privileges of a heteronormative culture will be meaningless. In short, we do not need to be included in an exclusionary culture. We need to create an inclusionary one. And this is going to mean questioning the white, cisgender, patriarchal heterosexuality that defines what identity is and is reproduced daily through cultural systems of power and knowledge, education, media, economics, government, etc. We will not create any meaningful change if we do not contest the exclusionary logics which our culture constantly creates and maintains through networks of power. And this is not simply an LGBT issue, far from it. Queer and third-wave feminist groups have understood intersectionality for a long time and have taken up the cause of identifying and challenging the systematic ways in which cultural institutions work to circumvent autonomy and inscribe bodies and minds with their exclusionary logics. Looking at the intersections of race, class, gender, the environment, etc., and how these things work together. Hence, it should not be surprising that when we look at a state like Michigan, where we face some of the worst discrimination against LGBT people, we're tied with Missouri for the most discriminatory state, something like that, and first place in hate crimes. Mississippi.
Yes.
Got it. Thank you. Faith shared that with me the other day. I stole her information. It's good. It's good statistic. I call the Midwest the Bible Belt. People don't like me for it. Well, it's not surprising here. We also see that black and brown people also face enormous odds of oppression. Thus, it's not surprising that a massive amount of money is being dumped into pitting racial minorities against us. You guys seen the billboards? These billboards, right? And the rhetoric that we are infringing upon or discrediting the civil rights movement of black Americans by fighting for our rights, which of course we don't deserve because our identities are a choice and we have never been segregated against. Sure. And that's true if you ignore history and science. So, gotta laugh. Okay. It's also very easy to win political debates, ignoring those kinds of things. And of course, this is the same kind of rhetoric that was used to pit the hardworking white lower classes against the poor black in the early 20th century. Well, this rhetoric is still being used. But you see my point. Systems of power and their machines of knowledge creation recognize the score. Understanding intersectionality marks a serious threat to those with power and privilege, and they are invested in them, as Marx well knew, in the propagation of wars among their enemies, dividing and pitting the 99% against one another. We won't fall for it. We see the intersections. Our worse off are those of gay and trans men and women of color, okay? Especially those who are poor and they are living in the most toxic places. It is not a coincidence, and we need to recognize it. Queer power is black power, it's trans power, it's workers' power, it's environmental power, and so on, and we will act as such. It is not enough to simply say everyone has a right to be who they are. This is a meaningless statement without the qualification that not only do they have a right to be who they are, but they also have a right to express who they are in ways that they see fit. This is the difference between equality and equity, and between assimilation and inclusion, and we must be brave enough to say so. I don't believe in equality, because the result of any dream of human rights, and there are countless examples, has meant the liberal model of man, hetero, able-bodied, white, etc., and the inclusion of those who can bend this model without breaking it. Of course, at the expense of their autonomy and the violent exclusion of everybody else. Ellen is fine, Allen Ginsberg is not. By the way, he's still being censored from Beyond the Grave. A high school teacher was recently fired for reading his work. Bill Cosby is great. Rudy Giuliani still asserts this. No joke. And insert any rapper's name is not. And here I might add that it is interesting that Caitlyn Jenner is now a kind of model of transgender identity. Okay, it's not interesting. It's actually quite terrifying. And it's terrible for every reason I've just mentioned. She and the heteronormative media representation she so agreeably plays into ignores intersectionality and the ways in which liberal ideologies dictate what it means to be human, violently excluding those who do not fit their gender ideals. It has been shocking to me to see the overwhelming support for her, because what she is doing denies years of progress by queer and feminist activists who have made so much progress in establishing the reality that trans women are born this way, and that hearts and minds make us who we are, not surgeries. Instead, Caitlyn refuses to be called she until she goes through probably millions of dollars of cosmetic surgeries, and reifies the strict social lines between male and female, which hurt many more than just LGBT people. Such reveals her politics of location, and here no need presents itself for her to question the systems of power and their supporting logics, which have done so well by her. cisgender women don't look that good at her age.
What age?
Some do. Some do. I wouldn't make that generalization.
Okay, some do.
Many do.
But things don't live naturally at that age, but that's okay. Science is materially quantifiable. Gravity and such. A young trans woman said to me recently, I think I'm going to try to just act like a male. I can't take the abuse anymore. I get it. I don't meet society's beauty standards. Jenner is reducing transgender identity to cosmetic surgery and heteronormative processes of transition. And I'm terrified to the standards it creates for our community. And worse, what it does for the world's perception of what it means to be transgender. They were confused before, they are royally confused now. I would like to say to anyone watching this, especially young trans women, surgery does not make you brave. Being who you are makes you brave. We should be fighting oppressive and... we should be fighting oppressive and exclusionary gender norms, not celebrating them as evidence of someone's autonomy. Such is the further propagation of the rhetoric of liberal choice, and we've done far too much to be reduced back to a lifestyle. Conclusion. We may be at an impasse, thanks to the checkbooks of some Booker T. Washington-style homosexuals and a multicultural whirlwind dominating our culture. Gay and lesbians have the opportunity, now more than ever, to join the upper echelons of our culture. They can have their slice of the American dream. The picket fence, the car, the house, marriage, the heteronormative liberal privilege. But I recommend that they heed Dr. King's words and realize that the house is burning, and the dream is something you'll wake up from. The hierarchy that privileges gays and lesbians in that order needs to be dismantled in the LGBT community. Remember everything you've gone through, and remember how long we had to tell them that this wasn't a choice. This is who we are. Remember that it is a liberal ideology which creates that rhetoric of radical individualism, that which blames the poor for being poor, and is afraid of the black and brown, which produces endless wars, and offers you inclusion only when you'll let go of the hands of the trans men and women who have been fighting with you since this thing began back at Stonewall. It is a relentless rhetoric that obfuscates how very real systems of economic, political, and social power have created the possibilities for the success of some and the failures of others. It is systematically reproduced through our complicity, and we need not be its beacons. It is imperative that we stop ignoring history. We need to create a better world. We don't need to gain entry into one that has long excluded us and continues to exclude others. Creative and meaningful solutions are necessary now in our communities, which challenge this one-size-fits-all model of what it means to be human. Inclusion means allowing for all persons to meaningfully exist and express who they are on their own terms. And we must allow for an autonomy of difference, queer, trans, gay, black, poor, so many others, while recognizing how systems of power create our material realities. It's far too late for us in the LGBT community not to see the irony of an invitation to a table that doesn't offer a seat to everyone. A new voice is necessary and we must speak it. Change will not come through the system, but only through our hands. Let's reach out and make it together. Thank you.